in here as an incredibly strong and popular player, and there is a reason for that with the many accolades that he has collected over the last few years in competitive StarCraft. Without further ado, he is the Red Zert in the Northeast representing ENCE. He's Serral.
And in the bottom left-hand side, he's gonna have to bring all the trickery of the X-Men. It is MaNa for Team Liquid. Which X-Men would MaNa be?
I have absolutely no idea.
Are you kidding me, Nate? You were making 90s references earlier about like build orders in the 90s.
I like nerdy stuff. I'm a fan of superhero type things, but I gotta be real with you. I never got into the whole X-Men thing. It just never happened for me. It's an area of which I have a very limited amount of experience, except for the incredibly cool Iceman, who the actor Mr. Ashmore is a StarCraft memer as well. In case anybody needed to know that. Super badass. But yeah, unfortunately, that's just not something I know enough about. But if you have an answer, I would love to hear it, Cats.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have a favorite X-Men. I feel like Serral is a little bit more of the Wolverine, being from Finland and all. MaNa would have to be, I don't know, Professor X to win this one, and then some. So, but yeah, I thought you were on with the 90s references earlier. You were like, yeah, this build order is from the 90s. I was like, oh crap, Nate knows build orders from the 90s. I don't really know many people.
Well, again, some
of us played in the 90s, Nate.
I did watch the ball drop in 1999. I was at the ripe age of 6 years old, Cats. So yeah. I was aware, I was alert, but I can't say that I was fully ready yet. I hadn't gone through the crucible of playing Terran for 10 years and completely melting my brain into mush. So I was thinking about other things than video game and comic references.
Fair enough. All right, well, we have MaNa having blocked the natural base, somewhat expected at this point from Protoss players in this matchup. And other than that, nothing really too eventful. There will be a Stargate opening on the side of MaNa, likely a Void Ray or an Oracle opening. We'll see what he decides. I like Oracles from positions like these because the bases are a little bit more spread and whatnot. We'll see what he opts for.
Yeah, I mean, he had that Probe Scout out pretty early. Serral has that front base, and people in chat were talking about this, and perhaps pick your brain on it. PVZ, still a matchup where when we talk about what's strong, we talk about what's good, and we talk about what's popular, this Zergling makes its way inside too. So Serral will know 100% that this is the Stargate opening well before any other sort of scout would go on. But like, is Serral, does he have any pressure on him to try and do something to end this game early? Or is that the trap that he could fall into as he sees it is going to be a Void Ray first on the defensive side of things?
I think if you're Serral, a lot of your game should be also to game future opponents in showing range, right? Like you might be stronger at the late game, but it wouldn't hurt to mix in all-ins just so that your opponents can't know to metagame you later on. So if you're going up against a quote-unquote weaker opponent, or you have a game to spare or something like that without feeling too bad, and even if you lose this series somehow, right, like trying out stuff and stuff like that, you still probably make it out of groups, probably in a good situation because you're Serral still. I wouldn't mind him mixing it up in these earlier stages just to show range.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. Or maybe he'll just take it slow the first game, and then if he's able to, like, kind of dip his toes into the water and see, okay, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, maybe I can just, close it out with something aggressive in the second map. But we were talking about how we've had the upsets. We've had some very long games and some very long series today so far, and here we go. This is kind of where I was going to be leaning for this one. Not only does MaNa go for an unbelievably fast third base, but he gets that second Stargate and takes the rest of his gas immediately. So when we talk about reasons why somebody who's maybe not the favorite can still win, it's I honestly believe that really committing to something and not doubting yourself is a severely underestimated tool to have. Yeah. And perhaps if MaNa is able to get into this and get things going, then we'll see that.
Oh wow.
I guess I'll throw it back to that Clem game, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm hugely favored over this Protoss, but he did the build that he needed to do, and he did it well enough, and I wasn't exactly perfectly prepared for it, and then things just completely fell apart. So we'll have to see if MaNa can make it work. But for the time being, we're going on a trip to Void Ray Island.
Yeah, unfortunately for MaNa, he will whiff the Oracle Micro there. The Spore obviously perfectly positioned by Serral in the hex that it needs to be at. to prevent that Oracle from doing too much damage, but at least he expected perhaps to get one drone. And MaNa also, on top of the very greedy Stargate, and all to your point, he has also dropped a very early Forge. He is also getting very early upgrades for his air from that cybernetics core as well. So yeah, he's kind of playing as the underdog. He's taking a lot of risks. He's saying, if you don't kill me sometime soon, I'm gonna accrue an advantage just by virtue of having a better or more greedy strategy than you do, right? So I absolutely love that from MaNa. And this is a good map to do it, because you were talking about like what build orders could be strong in this current meta that Serral could maybe mix in. And I'm sure a lot of people think PvC, they're thinking Queen Walks. It's not a great map for Queen Walks. So if you're MaNa and you are playing as the underdog, and this match for you is super important, and a map for you is super important, as opposed to everything we were saying about for Serral, then yeah, take those risks. And this one is paying off so far.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think it's very important to point out, you know, like as far as the Zerg side of things go, you don't really have a lot of options for trying to all in somebody in this day and age, especially with the you know, the Void Ray metagame and whatnot outside of those Queen Walks. So if the map isn't going to give you that, you definitely have to play around something else. So yeah, I guess that makes me like MaNa's strategy even more. He's probably considered the same things that you were just referencing, and perhaps even more importantly, when you're doing like the rock, paper, scissors of StarCraft strategies, if somebody plays standard, you play greedy, right? Or if someone plays greedy, you cheese them. But Serral didn't cheese MaNa this game, so he not only got to be greedy, but we have that fourth base just before the 7-minute mark for the Protoss player. And if he just gets up to 4 bases like this, uncontested, and just starts pumping out carriers on 3 Stargates, that's where I start to get, you know, that's I don't know, it gets a little hot under the collar.
Yeah, most definitely. Very cool strategy here, our approach from Serral with a very late, at least it wasn't a preemptive +1 million on his Zerglings. And what that's going to do is he's going to have the potential to kind of counter-attack with Zerglings and do more damage than the Void Rays can do on his side of the map, should the Void Rays of MaNa, should MaNa continue to produce a lot of Void Rays with something like Flux Veins, which we'll see if he's willing to get, or if you know, if they're just out of position, all of them, then the Zerglings can do a lot of damage on the other side. However, MaNa already ready for something like this with Archons and Zealots on the ground. So I don't think this is going to pay off for Serral just yet. So he's going to opt instead to go for the higher tech in the Hive and starts now Corruptor production. So we're going to see him kind of branch off and into that late game.
Yeah, and I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. If you're MaNa, though, there has to be a point where you're looking at as like a point of no return, though, right? Like you want to get to a certain place, but you don't want it to go maybe too much further from that. A little Roach Ling attack comes over towards that 4th base, but they've got Archons, we've got the Immortal, the Void Rays are not too far away, and the Observer's gonna, he's actually had a really good spot with that Observer to see everything going on there.
Yeah, that is a lot of Queens as well on the side of Serral. Now carrier production has begun, as well as Flux Veins for the Void Rays. Serral morphing in some Banelings, so he's going to be likely looking to apply some pressure onto this 4th. Even the creep is consistent with that, right? Like we see the mind of Serral somewhat reflected on his creep, on the priorities that he gives, that pushing on that creep forward to where he wants to be aggressive. It's just wonderful to see.
Yeah, and he's got a tremendous amount of queens with this push. It makes it seem like he might try to force the issue. I don't know with the choke point, unless he breaks the rocks. Well, I guess he's going to make Banelings. So this is the commitment coming in. The 3 carriers are just finishing with this right as the attack gets ready with the Banelings. The Void Rays are going to see one of the little packs over here on the side. That's a very nice grab. No run-bys during the attack, but still needs to actually hold the door against this. The Roaches and Banelings are going to try to smash into the pylons, going by the battery that's overcharged, so that's taken out of the equation. The Void Rays themselves can do well against the Corruptors, but there's so much anti-air in the form of these Queens. If you're going to defend this base, you kind of have to bring the carriers over, and at that point it becomes, does he actually have enough to defend those carriers from the Corruptors? So far the answer is yes. Archons get a couple big juicy splash hits. 3 Void Rays remaining now, down to just 2. Interceptor count is mostly okay. The Zealot Warping is actually getting it done. MaNa holds.
Absolutely beautiful from MaNa. A very cool move there for Serral. A lot of the time might be criticizing the Zerg player for attacking with the Banelings right before Baneling speed is done. But Serral identifies that the Void Rays were out of position. So he thinks, okay, I can get in right now with these paintings and get rid of the static defense because I don't need the speed. If your Void Rays are not there, you're not going to be able to stop these. He's right about that. So he gets the opening in killing the static defense before it's fully situated. But unfortunately for him, I mean, MaNa, great job focus firing the Corruptors with those Archons. Serral not, in turn, focus firing the Archons perhaps as good as he could have. So when the Corruptors poke back in for the carriers, they get absolutely decimated, demolished by those Archons. And Serral is forced to run back, tail between his leg. This is a good advantage for MaNa at this point.
Yeah, he got Serral to make a big push into him. And I mean, look at what Serral's building right now. He's going into Broodlords. He's mixing that in. The Corruptors count, he's kind of adding to it. He's getting the Carapace upgrade for the Flyer units. And these Roachlings should be able to delay this 5th base for a decent bit of time. But I mean, +2 is coming in for the carriers. He's up to 6 now. As that number gets higher and higher, it becomes I would say exponentially more difficult to deal with them. You know, 3 carriers is one thing, but if he gets to 9, then that's when you hear the bells, like the Silent Hill alarm going off, and all of a sudden the world becomes a very dark and scary place.
Yeah, dark and scary place it is for Serral right now, though. I mean, a lot of this Roachling is kind of useless for him on the ground. I mean, it's going to be helpful, but it overlaps and roll with the Broodlords a lot of the time, right? Like, because the Broodlords can very well deal with the ground army very easily, and Serral has a lot of that. So he's going to have to find a way to kind of get rid of this ground army efficiently, effectively. Maybe if MaNa was trying to take a 5th base, that would be an easy way to do it for Serral. But for the time being, I don't think that Serral can be aggressive, even though he is maxed and has a very expensive composition because of this group of units. They're just useless. They don't add anything to his comp.
No, so it's, I mean, at the very least, he's got some zoning for anti-ground. But again, I mean, the carrier count's going to continue to rise. If you were looking at this matchup and you're like, okay, what's the one thing you shouldn't let a Protoss player that you're favored against do? Be like, well, you know, assemble the Golden Armada, because that's always going to be one of the hardest types of army compositions that you can deal with, no matter what the skill gap between you and your opponent is, right? Pretty much everything else is a bit more straightforward answers for it, or it comes down to a control micro thing that's a little bit easier to express the skill. So now Serral is he's gonna end up having to deal with this. And on MaNa's sake, I wonder how much he's gonna spread himself apart. Like, is he gonna try and hold these cross-map expos, because he's got his army by the 4th, but of course the base he's trying to secure doesn't have quite the same amount of defense there. But I guess with the Immortals, he's thinking about those very weak ground units, and the Broodlords are a bit too slow to get around. So he's just playing this map control. And I do ask myself if MaNa is considering, like a time where he will feel like he needs to actually do something with this army, as these forces are going to get caught out on creep a little bit there.
Yeah, and MaNa also in turn doesn't really need those Immortals too much, so both players kind of trade in the units that they don't need too much. And I love the point that you opened there with, because yeah, those units, when I say they're useless on offense, right? They're not useless defensively. They can still deal with little rambis from MaNa, and that helps if Serral wants to elongate this game, which is not usually what most Zergs want to do, but Serral does feel confident in the late game. However, in making that decision, we see, for example, that MaNa will get enough map control to kind of make the creep recede, to clear a lot of that creep, to regain control of those watchtowers. And the position gets technically, I think, a little bit better from the pole off of inaction. But again, now you're entering a late game against Serral, so,
Yeah, and well, we get to see the carriers doing a little bit of their thing. Of course, there's a lot of queens, a lot of spore crawlers. It's not the most uncommon mistake, unfortunately, when a Protoss player ends up, kind of burning out those interceptors, and you start to realize you've overextended just because you either don't have the bank to quickly replenish them, or the interceptors themselves just die too fast. So he's going to add on a couple more Stargates. +3 attack is coming close, and Serral's going to get the rest of his upgrades. He's like, okay, if I can get a Ling run by and just wipe out half your bases, that will also be a win condition for me. Just kind of make it so that he can start to trade against this Protoss. We're getting close to, I'll use the word Death Ball. I'll invoke that dark magic, as he's got a hell of an army. That's a very, very powerful force. +3 on both his air and his ground. About to finish 12 carriers, 7 High Templar, and 3 Archons. And of course, the big mama ship.
Yeah, actually, Nathan, that last fight, if we could resume it from replay, I wonder if MaNa could have just attack moved. Like, sometimes you have to wonder, like, is he giving Serral too much respect? Like, because Serral is obviously, I mean, you give any tools to Serral and he's going to use them as well as anyone can use anything in this game. But would that have been enough to make up for the gap, I think, in army complexity at that point in time? Serral, even after that engagement, says, oh shit, and brings a bunch more spores, right, to help in the defense there. So he was clearly worried about that. MaNa, I can see it from his perspective, like he wanted to get Storms ready. Now he has a bunch of High Templars ready with Storm as well. And he's poking at a different angle where Serral is not as well defended, perhaps. So maybe this works even better, the patience, but yeah, I do wonder if he could have just closed out the game there or at least killed that base.
Yeah, I have to say, like, especially if you're the underdog, right? And you've assembled the army that you want, you know you're not really supposed to win. I feel like giving the player who's known for, you know, pretty much winning nonstop all the time, more time to think about what they need to do
this, right?
Right? Yeah, exactly. You're kind of creating by having this maxed out army and playing it slow, you're giving Serral all the possible opportunity in the world to figure out what he needs to stop you, or to get himself into a position where he can pick you apart, you know, trade out all those roaches we were talking about. I wouldn't mind seeing him try to force the issue, because if it doesn't work, then it's like, whatever, you know, like you got to have some level of confidence to a degree, because you're not, it's not a matchup. You're not really supposed to be able to take this. So if you can do it, do it. Get some solid feedbacks. He's picked off a lot of the spores. Most of the interceptors are intact. But he like kind of pulls back, and I ask myself, do you actually think he couldn't have done a little bit more there? I don't know. I think he could have.
Right? Like, I can see it from MaNa's perspective. Again, the Broodlords are arriving. The Templars are not going to have a lot of longevity in that fight. And maybe this is just the way that he's used to playing. But at the same time, I mean, he did a lot to kind of sacrifice his position on the other side of the map, in the south side. He relocates his entire army to the north. He gets a little bit more positioning there. But I mean, as soon as he does that, Serral takes 2 more bases on the south, right? And we see that those bases are already up and mining. And that is an advantage. I mean, if we look at the map now and we look at the map and the situation 5 minutes ago, Serral is in a better position than he was. And that to me is a very scary prospect. Still, right now, I would give the advantage to MaNa. And if MaNa was the best Protoss player in the world, or the Serral equivalent, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I can see it. I can see that, you know, he's confident. He wants to avoid the Broodlords. He has taken good fights so far with the feedbacks. But it is the underdog situation, right, that worries me. It is the fact that your opponent is better. It's not the position here that I'm analyzing. It's the mentality that you should have going into a match with the best, potentially, in the eyes of many, certainly mine, the best Zerg in the world.
Exactly. Trying to play a war of attrition against Serral is pretty much saying, I think I'm going to outplay one of the best Zerg players of all time. You know, like that's what you say when you do that, and especially when you give the Zerg more time in this situation. So he's going to push this base down, and again, you know, good move. He's able to pick this off. Serral's immediately going to try to counter on the northwest. There's a bunch of cannons and some batteries. He uses the storms. So I mean, solid defense. Solid defense on his part, but you know, then I start to think about the other parts of the game that's like, well, eventually, you know, the spore crawler field will just get bigger if Serral has enough money and he can keep moving these guys forward. That's an issue of time. These don't cost supply and they can be moved. So eventually the positions that he has to attack are going to be so heavily fortified that you're like, okay, well, now he not only has to out micro Serral in a head-to-head fight, but he has to do it over 20 spore crawlers, and you start to feel a little bit less confident with each passing minute, because Serral's won a million games like this before. And
I love this.
But let's see this. Big recall to the northwest.
Oh, you know what I would have loved even more, that I was thinking about right now, like right before this happened, I was thinking, what if MaNa relocates his army, but also if he didn't actually teleport the mothership and then had another recall available for the south side. So you can pull the army at the very slow army of Serral here and then back with the mothership to the south. I think that would have been amazing, because now the neural parasites are actually coming down. A huge, actually, parasitic bomb onto most of the army of MaNa. He's trying to storm, but now Ultras on the ground are going to have something to say about those Templars. However, no Overseers. No, there is 2 Overseers. All of the Templars will falter, and Serral with a wonderful engagement. His army was consolidated, and this is exactly what we were fearing, Nate. I mean, now Serral has every tool. He has every unit that he wanted, including Ultralisks, a lot more complexity in the air, Infestors with full energy, and just enough Vipers for the beautiful, most outstanding parasitic bombs that will grant him a huge lead in that engagement and this game.
I think there was a window there we both kind of recognized for a few minutes where if he had forced the issue, Opportunities were definitely there. And even in that big fight that just happened, you know, now Serral has 3-3 on his corruptors. You know, the upgrade advantage that MaNa had earlier is totally gone. So the carriers, they struggled to kill those corruptors, right? Because they have a bunch of armor by default, and they are the unit that counters you. So you try to take this head-to-head fight, and then you're trying to run. Your interceptors aren't all coming out, so you have maybe like a quarter of them shooting while all the carriers die, and then the parasitic bomb is there. And this is not surprising from Serral. You know, if MaNa had been able to make that work, then we would have all been shocked and been like, okay, wow, yeah, really good job. But he still just has the 5 Stargates too, so he's trying to rebuild that air army with this massive bank, but he can't spend it quickly enough. You know, maybe if he had gone up to like 8 Stargates or 9, just to be able to remax off of what he's accumulated so far, I'd feel a little bit better. But he's about to lose a lot in the time that it'll take for him to be able to resituate himself.
Yeah, I mean, props to MaNa for playing the game that he was playing, and to be honest, on most fronts he was outdoing Serral. Oftentimes, like we saw him kill this base and the base that he's about to kill earlier, and that was a wonderful move. But the beauty of being as good as you are, if you are Serral, is that you are willing to give up these bases without any contesting sometimes, right? Like a lot of players would be like, oh, that's 2 bases that I can't give up. Serral is like, okay, I'm a little bit late, you can take that one. Okay, I'm a little bit late, you can take that one. But when he sees the opportunity, then he'll take it and reset your full army, and then he'll take a massive advantage. And another thing that Serral is not afraid to do, because he is so confident in his ability to win those fights, to control as well as he does, is be very low on the drone count, where most Zerg players would not feel comfortable with this. Serral is okay having a massive army and just looking to outtrade in terms of cost efficiency, something that Zergs are terrified of doing against Protoss armies of this kind.
Yeah, and here we are. You're now trying to hold on, rebuild, remax. Your opponent has 28 corruptors, and with 9 broodlords, good luck getting your archons underneath for those juicy shots. So it's only going to become more difficult. Now he doesn't have the bank. Serral still has the bank. Serral still has a ton of bases, as you've mentioned. He's okay with giving up bases every time MaNa's gone to one side of the map. He's expanded on the other. This is basic. I mean, I guess at a competitive level, it's basic Zerg strategy. You want to expand where your opponent isn't pushing and stretch them thin all across. Use the mobility, use the creep spread. And in the case of the Broodlords, well, you kind of want to keep them somewhat centered. They are your slowest unit that you're kind of playing around, but they're not the most important. They're mostly just zoning things away from diving you. But as long as the game hinges on the carriers and Serral's in a position to trade large amounts of resources, it's not going to get any easier for MaNa. Comes up, gets some feedbacks on the Vipers, which is great. But I'm asking myself, where is the fight that MaNa needs to actually be able to win the game? He can trade out all day, but you know, at some point he's going to need to do some serious damage if he wants to win this. Fungal's going to land on some of the carriers. The interceptors have been unleashed. Going to target down a couple of the infestors and the Vipers. Good target fire from the carriers. Actually very well done. Clears through the spores. And look how many Void Rays he has. He has adjusted very nicely with this. He's going to lose a lot on the flip side of it. If he sends the Void Rays back home, I'm certain the Corruptors will dive this. So he needs to keep them with this. And
yeah, Serral,
it's still a very scary army, but he's losing a lot of his bases back home.
Yeah, Serral on the retreat. We've seen this before from the Finn. I mean, he is just saying, okay, I mean, you got me. You got those beautiful feedbacks. You got good storms onto my Corruptors. This is not the fight that I want to take. So he just goes on the retreat, takes some losses. He's going to lose 3 bases in the process, but his army is still left untouched, and he still has a bank. So make no mistake, this was a huge win for MaNa. I love that he capitalized on the fact that that Templar move onto the air fleet of Serral, including the feedbacks onto the Vipers and a few of those infestors, was the moment that MaNa goes, okay, like I just did more than I have done to start a fight before the fight starts in a very long time. Now is my opportunity. But Serral has now reset, right? His Corruptors are back to full HP for the most part. His Vipers have full energy. I'm not sure where the infestors are, so he still has to be careful. He's just sharking around looking for pickoffs. But there's still a big fight coming, and MaNa did not win that big fight.
Yeah, and again, there are 42 Corruptors on the map. Serral only has 20 drones, but he's still at 190 supply. And he still has a bunch of these spore crawlers too. So at the end of the day, he has the ability to at least remake some of what he's lost. He's not really mining a lot anymore. or much at all. But MaNa's going to come up over here as the Spore Crawlers reposition. There's the Mothership getting yoinked into the front, taking out some of that Viper energy. The Time Warp,
where's the
not a huge factor. There's not much else in there.
Yeah, I don't see the Ultras for Serral. They are kind of really important to take down the High Templars if possible. MaNa did start that with the good feedbacks, but Serral in retaliation takes the Mothership. With that kind of trade, Serral, in spite of losing all of his Spores, just retreats, and back there, when the Ultras join up, when he has more Spores to fall back to, he can take that fight. So MaNa recognizes that, he's gonna fall back, and while this game is still wide open, it's certainly far from unwinnable for MaNa. It's doable.
Yeah, he's got Zealot Warping to try and defend his production, but this is where the problem becomes, you know, for the Zerg player, you're trying to play around your bases and a little bit of War of Attrition. Void Rays are going to try and chase these Ultralisks. This is what happens when every unit gets 7 speed upgrades. No dice there. As that's the power creep lane we went down with this game, but as Serral tries to move around, he still has the tech, the infrastructure. If MaNa moves too far out and loses the Stargates, he doesn't really have the money to replenish those, right? He's going to build a Mothership, but this is basically it as far as the gassy units go. If he blows it, so
it's one big fight for either. I mean, look at the economies. Yeah. Look at the worker counts for either player. They both have massive armies, and it all will come down to one engagement. That's a good start for MaNa, an Infestor for free.
Yeah, it gets a good grab on the Infestors. It's such a scary situation.
Oh,
neither
Serral
player can really move out without risking.
Serral's going for it. Oh,
there's an Abduct, gets one carrier. Infestors go for a fungal on the High Templar. There are the little feedback action.
Yeah, that's big. High Templar down. I mean, it's big because Nate, there's 2 High Templars left, and MaNa can only replenish or remake 4 High Templars max at this point with the bank that he has.
I like this little DT Zealot hit squad. Definitely something you want to keep away from those detectors, but it's one of the few things he can use as a decent counter to the rest of this little ultra hit squad. I feel like I've just seen it so many times where the Protoss tries to move out and then you get that little run by into the back, and those Zerglings with the adrenal glands, if they can get on the Stargates, they're going to die so quickly. But since neither player is really mining much, it just turns into an incredibly awkward situation, Cats. And I guess the only question left for us to try to answer is, when will that big fight happen? Who is going to force the issue?
Yeah, I think MaNa is going to be looking for openings, as he has been. But the problem is that Serral is Serral has the more mobile army. So it's going to be difficult for MaNa to dictate when or where the fight happens. When it happens, however, he needs to have a good spread on those Void Rays. If they all get parasitic bombed, then it's going to go in the favor of Serral. I mean, he has a billion Corruptors here. Oh man, they found the carriers. This is bad, Nate. 5 carriers gone bye-bye.
Yeah, that's pretty... He tried to... When he did the recall, the Void Rays were not recalled with the carriers, and actually a couple of... I think one of the carriers was left behind with the Void Rays, so his army got split up, and Serral jumped on that as soon as he realized that it was happening. But also, like you just said, the carriers were over dead space. So the Archons, they only have like 3 range. They can't sit in the in emptiness. So unfortunately, not able to get those big fat shots. Now he's going to go into Tempest, which, I mean, yeah, I think that just about says everything we need to know on this one. I don't think he can beat this army anymore, Cats.
Not anymore. I mean, those 5 carriers were pivotal. He cannot remake them. He does not have the economy to remake them, much less after losing his only mining base, in fact, in the top left-hand side. So now this is all that MaNa has left to work with. He is effectively praying for a miracle. I mean, he played a good game, an even game. Look at that, Serral so cheeky, burrowing the drones, anticipating that the army is gonna arrive there. He sees it through the creep, so he burrows the drones, knowing that, if you see the drones burrow, then you bring an observer and kill them. But if you don't see them, you just assume they were never there. Most of the time.
He doesn't even have a robo, by the way. He lost.
Oh, wow.
There's no robo. There are no observers on the map at all. So detection is completely off the table, whether it's for harass or, I'll be honest with you, the infestors, yeah. I think is something that has to be on his mind as well.
Yeah. I mean, if the infestors burrow and do neuroparasites from burrow, then there's no answer for that. MaNa is effectively out of this game. I think there's no way that he can win. Serral's not going to give him any opening. maybe if Serral attacked onto, if you reset Serral back to bronze and he attacks dead onto all of the army of MaNa with the Archons clumped up, shooting at all of the Corruptors at once, then maybe there's a chance, but that's not gonna happen. So I don't imagine a world where MaNa brings this back.
Yeah, TT's gonna try and get into a fist fight with a gargantuan monstrosity known as the Ultralisk. They will not win that fight. The Void Rays are going to get hit with the fungal growth and the parasitic bombs. So you ask yourself, can they trade against the Corruptors? Trick question. They don't need to. Now the Void Rays have about 10 hit points, which I believe will be I think if you have a little putter, I think just one stroke from a putter should be able to knock those out of the sky. And Serral's, he's still got 44 Corruptors. So it's a little bit of a slow burn on this one, ladies and gentlemen. Like a nice fall scented candle. I'll go maybe like pumpkin apple. It's one of my favorites.
I'm about to stand up and light up my incense too, just to get some scent of that. And Nate, because this game, I mean, there's not much left to say about it. It's all Serral now. It's unfortunate because MaNa had so many openings. It felt like MaNa had positions where he could have maybe pushed the issue a little bit harder, where he got to where he needed to get a little bit earlier, where he found those bases of Serral, and then he thought, you know what, I'm gonna outplay this guy. Watch.
I really would have loved to just see him force the issue as soon as he had that +3 finishing on his carriers and zealots, and just try and force it, right? Just take that big fight, because if you give Serral enough time, I mean, there's a reason that this guy was the first person, first non-Korean to win that big world championship.
Yeah.
There's a reason why people put 11 million channel points on this guy to win. And there's a reason why. Yeah. I love MaNa. I love him to death. It's just, you try to go toe to toe with Serral, this is what happens. GG.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's that's not great analysis probably. Like, you try to go to, but it's the truth. I mean, if you are in a situation like this, you have to evaluate yourself as a player relative to your opponent as well. It's an upset for just about anyone to take a game against Serral in this matchup in the late game, right? Like, we just don't see it very often. Now, if MaNa had been able to take this game and then he takes another game like this, well, congratulations, MaNa, because you're just about to win everything.
Yeah, exactly, right? If you can take it to the late game, a late macro game against Serral, where both players have every single possible opportunity to do everything they want to do, and you beat Serral, that's that all of a sudden becomes like, why on earth has everybody been sleeping on this guy? Why did we not all predict him to win 2-0 if he's capable of this? And yeah, again, it really isn't meant as any sort of like harsh criticism. It's just you have one of the absolute tip-top Zerg players of all time against a very good Protoss player who has shown that he can do a lot of awesome strategies and take maps and whatnot, but he's not known for usually winning those series when he has to go up against guys like Serral, and stuff like this is a bit of the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, he to the credit of MaNa, he kept up. He put himself in positions to beat Serral, in my opinion. He couldn't seize him, or he didn't seize him, or he thought, what I'm used to doing from this position is kind of like when you're ahead, get more ahead type philosophy, and that's not always gonna apply to everything, sadly. So I respect his approach. If you remove the names, I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, it makes sense. He's in a strong position, etc. But just a difficult one, a difficult sell against, in my opinion, the GOAT. Either way, this is a new game. We'll see if MaNa changes his approach a little bit. For Team Liquid, one of the strongest Protoss in Europe, it is MaNa.
And his opponent in the Southwest, the red Zerg player, as you so eloquently put it, the GOAT. He is Serral.
Yeah, there's like 4 people on Team Liquid forums that get upset whenever I call Serral the GOAT.
That's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
I'm okay with
but
that.
Having convictions and believing things is that's the most real-ish you can do, Paolo. All right, don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise.
Thank you, Nate. I'll keep believing.
Serral is the GOAT, by the way. I completely agree with you. And if you disagree, that's okay. You're free to have your own opinions too. We're all people.
Go for it. Yeah.
I like to think that those who would disagree with such a statement also still like StarCraft. So we still have more in common than we don't.
Of course. Yeah, that's a very good point, Nate. So we're all on the same team. Whether you think Rogue is the GOAT or Dark is the GOAT or Serral is the GOAT.
Or if you believe that it's wrong to call anybody a GOAT that isn't a literal GOAT.
Or Maru. I guess Maru is very much in contention for the GOAT. If I had to put someone in contention with the GOAT for against Serral, it would probably actually be Maru, right?
Maybe.
What is these 2 pythons? Pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess that is. I'm not the Protoss expert, but I like it. It. He's got his setup. If I find myself asking a question when I see MaNa do something, I like to think that that's a good thing, because again, taking the most straightforward path against somebody as good as Serral is simply a huge risk. So if he wants to go double Stargate and he can get up to 4 bases by 7 minutes again, I'm all for it. Just draw a line in the sand that you're like, okay, once we reach this point of no return, I'm not going to pull the brakes, right? I'm just going to go in and try to do everything that I can, because I do think he had the better army composition earlier. He had those carriers out when there were only like 10 or so Corruptors and a few Vipers, and those would have 100% been the most favorable fights he could have gotten, because once Serral had that double Spire and you get that +3 Carapace on the Corruptors, then killing them with just Interceptors becomes very, very difficult. And well, I like this. MaNa's doing his little pokey poke thing. He's got his Adept out on the map, just trying to see what's going on, and
nice
going Stargate.
Yeah, he also tried to get close enough to the drone so that the drone wouldn't be able to morph that Spore. Unable to this time, but might be able to stop the drone before he gets center mass of that of the hatchery that he's about to become. Instead, he will find his way, the drone that is, to an extractor. But look at MaNa, he already has the probe patrolling on the other side, so the hatchery here will also be denied. And that is a big delay. Serral dropping his hatchery at 500 resources. And this is the kind of advantage that MaNa accrued himself little by little in the last game, right? Like outplaying Serral on multiple instances, just not enough to, to really just close it out, unfortunately. But that overextension, for example, at the 3rd or the 4th base of MaNa in the last game, that's the kind of thing that if he gets an advantage like that again, I would very much like to see him try to pounce on it.
Now Depth is gonna. Oh wow! On the secondary one, they come up, they trim the fat off the links. Hey,
very
if
nice.
the Adept gets away, that is some. Those are some smooth moves. I mean, maybe he'll yeet in and like try to focus a drone or two if there's nothing that if he doesn't see anything there to be concerned about. But yeah, gets away with murder a little bit. Not too shabby of a start as he boots up that 3rd base here on Gigantha.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of little jabs that Serral has been taking to the face, and to be honest, it's all to the credit of MaNa, again, because he's chaining them together, right? So Serral doesn't have the time to recompose because MaNa has such a strong plan there, right? Like the Adept is denying the drone, the Probe is denying the other drone, anticipating what Serral might do. Then comes in the Void Ray to kill an Overlord. Now you're supply blocked all of a sudden. And, it's tiny little things. But at this point, 300 resources lost for Serral, only 50 resources lost for MaNa. A very late 3rd base for Serral, mind you, in the location that he didn't want to take it originally. So things are going swimmingly for the Pulse so far. Can he keep up this pace and capitalize?
Yeah, it's about getting into that rhythm, and we saw MaNa do that last game. If you're Serral and just watching this as an observer, I would guess if you're not planning to do a big all-in, maybe you skip the big queen push, right, with the Roach Bane. I think it's worth bringing up that was certainly not something that helped him. I think that's one of the reasons why we kind of wanted MaNa to try and do a big attack. Is Serral invested a lot into that early push. If you guys recall, it was like a ton of queens, Corruptors, Roach's Banes, and MaNa held it, losing like 2 or 3 of his Void Rays right as his carriers came out. Didn't lose any of his carriers. It was a ton of damage. So maybe Serral skips that, tries to go a bit faster into something else, or he just doubles down on the big attack, which I still think is dangerous because, double Void Ray production, or if you're going to try and Roach bust someone, you need to have a whole lot for it to work.
Yeah, this is one of the best Roach Queen walks maps, but Serral's actually going for a Spider already. And if we can go back to that base with the gas, Niall, and do a quick zoom on that gas, that's a 2 tours, or however you say the camera, moment. I mean, I never see that from Serral, right? Nate, I mean, that's just something that you don't ever see. Is Serral get frazzled enough and under enough chaos that he lets accidentally one of those gases finish. That's amazing. All props to MaNa for that.
There you go. If you were looking for the slightest tiny sign of perhaps MaNa getting a little bit inside Serral's head, that might be it. Feeling a bit of the pressure. Although, of course, I mean, still 1-0, still played a very good game. And the Overseer going through should tell him, again, we are headed right back to where we were in that last map. He's going to be building up the Air Force. We're going to see him take that 4th base, get his fleet beacon. There it is. +1 is finishing for his air. He will need to wait a little to start +2 since the fleet beacon is not done. But that's not a huge deal for him either way. He can still try to situate that next base, maybe get a shield battery or 2 on it in case of a push. And we do have some roaches being made, and he's been making queens, a lot of them. So we're hitting the 12 mark on queens. So is this going to be it? Are we going to have, what is it, the German lift ride or something going down the middle of the map, Cats?
I mean, the creep spread is pretty good, but it is very late for an attack like this. I mean, it looks like Serral's kind of poised to do it, but I'm not sure if I like it too much. If there's enough shield batteries on the side of MaNa, he will have plenty of Void Rays, a lot of time to prepare. And when you get enough Void Rays, the Void Rays can occupy all the same airspace together, right? Like they don't have collision, whereas the queens do. The queens are kind of chunky, so when you have small numbers of queens against small numbers of Void Rays, that tends to do better for the queens. But when you have a lot of Void Rays against a lot of queens, the Void Rays start getting a little bit of an edge in some fronts, provided, again, that there is not enough surface area for the queens and there is static defense situated. MaNa does not have it. He just has to abandon this base for the time being. It is a very late Ravager queen push, but it's happening, Nate.
It is happening, Cats. We're going to see the Corrosive Vials thrown down to zone the Void Rays off the queens. He lets the Nexus finish, I guess, just to soak damage as much as possible. And he's building Tempest. He just finished 3 Tempests, so he wants to have more range to deal with the Ravagers and the Queens so that they can't hit him as easily while he's working with the wall and just microing the Void Rays. We do see a Void Ray get picked off. That's still a lot of Queens to get through. There's still plenty of transfuse energy, and the overcharge on the shield battery has run out. So actually that shield battery gets depowered, so it won't even be able to continue to run as the vials are going to keep forcing this Void Ray micro, and he's just getting closer and closer to the, the soft underbelly of the Protoss base.
Yeah, the Tempests have done a wonderful job with the Queens, and they're almost out of energy. However, I think MaNa has no choice but to abandon this base, and he will end up losing it. But if he can clear the whole army of Serral, he might still have a shot in this game. It's looking a little bit difficult, increasingly so, but the Queens are almost out of the equation, and that'll be really nice. The Void Rays are trying to circumvent the Queens. Instead, he's going to choose to recall back to his 3rd base. He needs to keep this base alive. There is no battery overcharge available, and actually, Serral choosing to disengage. No! That was a huge pile.
Yeah, big piles. I don't hate the Tempest choice at all, by the way. It did a really good job of being able to trim off, but again, the Tempests are not really known for the DPS. So you have the range, you're a little bit safer, you don't put these units at risk. If he had carriers finishing at that time, you'd probably lose all the interceptors, and then all the you lose the damage that you would be putting out at that point. So with 17 Corruptors being built, I think that tells us everything we need to know about where this game is headed. He's going to possibly just set up for a big smash. Yeah, it's after the natural gets ravaged like that, it's hard to see where the opportunities are. He's building 2 more cybernetics cores so he can get back into the upgrades as quickly as possible.
So many Tempests, though. Like, I mean, the Tempests are amazing. The problem is going to be the Corruptors. Be careful with those Void Rays. They are the only thing that is keeping you alive against that many Corruptors. MaNa has now been made aware of it. He's making carriers. I would almost cancel those in favor of the Void Rays. I mean, when you have so much depth as to have Void Rays, carriers, and Tempests all in your army, it becomes increasingly more difficult to control. Now, MaNa displayed beautiful control in the last game, and he is adding 2 additional Stargates. If he can stabilize, this game is still kind of wide open, but he needs to hold on to this base first of all.
Yeah, Ravagers pushing up on the 3rd base, just looking to kill a bunch of the probes, and perhaps Nexus gets the surround on him, lands the Vials on the Void Rays, and now it's just Corruptors versus Tempests. This fight does not end well for the Tempest. That 3rd base is going to get obliterated, and Serral's going to say no upset for match number 3 of